Hi, I'm Julie Fay. We're at the Imperial Theatre in the Mohawk area of Over the Rhine. This is a place that's been calling me for a long time. It has wonderful design, but shabby. Shabby is somehow appealing to me. And my partner and I purchased this in 2014. It was taking on a lot of water, and finally the Reverend was ready to sell the property. So we were able to purchase it, and the idea is to turn this back into a theater from the vaudeville theater. It started out as in 1912, through silent film, through talkies in 1926, to the golden age of Hollywood, 1938 and 40, when the new facade was put on. It's kind of in the art moderne period, which is very appealing to me. And once inside, it's magical and needs to be brought back for today's theater use, film use, performance, and for the benefit of the neighborhood and the many talented, creative performers that are in our neighborhoods.
Can I ask you, are you from Cincinnati? Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in St. Bernard, and we moved to Bridgetown when I was a kid. My dad was a chemist at P&G in Ivorydale, and when they built the Miami Valley labs, we moved to the edge of the universe. And I think the last subdivision in Bridgetown at the time, adjacent to cornfields. And that's where I grew up. Went to St. Al's, St. Aloysius, went to Mercy. It was a neighborhood with a lot of kids. A lot of my friends went to West High and Oak Hills. We had lots of fun that was appropriate for the time, and that would be in the 50s. And it was a whole different world then.
Did you like growing up there?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a choice, so I didn't know what the options were, but yeah, I enjoyed growing up there.
Well, hey, sometimes even when you don't have options, you can not like it, right?
My parents were pretty strict, so we worked around that a bit and had a good time. So we commuted back to St. Bernard every Sunday for Sunday dinner at my grandma's, and I was very close to my grandparents. And my grandpa thought I should be an artist. After making our way through Mother Mercy, and I still have friends from Mercy. I actually went to Edgecliff. My dad didn't want me going to that beatnik school you see, the art school. So ended up majoring in math and chemistry and minoring in philosophy, and graduated in 3 years and got married 2 weeks later. We rented an apartment in Cheviot. My husband did, when I met him, he said he dug ditches, and it turned out that's actually what he did. He did construction work and was part of a small company. So I've been interested in, I've always been interested in architecture and that sort of thing. My dad also was interested in that. So it was fun being married to somebody in a small building company. And we managed the apartment building, the 11 unit we lived in, and then moved to a different apartment complex that they had built. It was his dad and his dad was in charge of construction, and his dad's business partner was kind of the mover and shaker, and the guy who was the mayor of Cheviot and at the country club and all that. He had one son, and Ed's dad had 8, so there's quite a difference in the two. But they had a very close family, a good family that did lots of things together. And I have 5 kids, and we lived in Bridgetown. We lived in Cheviot, then we moved to Bridgetown, and then I have all brothers, so I expected all boys. I ended up with 4 girls and a boy, so when the 4th child was a girl, we had to get into a different house. So that's when we moved to Montfort Heights, and so it's where we were for many years.
Can I ask you, how did you meet your husband?
At a dance at the Fenwick Club downtown, which is where P&G is now. Yeah. So they had mixers, people. That's what people did, it was before the current era. You actually met people in person. Ed's company did the Ferguson car washes, and you might remember the Fergie logo that was on top of neons. That was theirs, and it's in the Sign Museum now. We all love neon. And we did West Side Racket Club. And then I got divorced, so that was interesting. I eventually got a job at GE, Aircraft Engines, worked in marketing communications. That was 1983. It was after several false starts at jobs that did not work out, like selling Yellow Page ads for an alternative Yellow Page out of California. Not what you want to do when you're just involved in a divorce, getting rejected 10 or 15 times a day. Not good, not good. But I eventually got the job at GE, and that was actually through, I did a lot of photography. I had a darkroom and was always interested in art and photography. So some of the people I met during at a class at UC, an evening class at UC, it was a guy from California taught the class, and it was photography, and we got together and formed a photo group, and eventually had a show at the Arts Consortium. And that's where I met somebody from the photo department at GE. He was on the board of the Arts Consortium. And I asked my usual question, got any jobs in photography? He said, oh, you don't want to be a photographer here, we're cutting that department out. He said, we've had one available for years, it's a micro photography job. I said, well, it could be interesting. He said, no, you want to do something else. So I had a friend also who worked at GE who would bring me the job postings, the internal job postings, and I pursued those, going over to the racket club at night using the typewriter, and doing resumes, cover letters, and stuff. And eventually, the gentleman who was on the consortium board said there was a job coming up in. Oh my God, I'll think of the word. It's a computer graphics thing. And there were only 3 of these pieces of equipment in town, one at GE, P&G, and then a place up in East Walnut Hills. And interestingly, that next week, there was an ad in the paper for a job from the place in East Walnut Hills. So I applied for that, and probably 2 months later, I thought, okay, I haven't heard anything. I should have heard something by now. So a friend of mine ran post-production services, and he knew of the machine, and he knew the guy there. So he gave me his number, and I called, and he said, oh, yeah. He said, we had like 65 applications for that job. And I thought, okay, they're certainly going to hire a 20-something, not a 30-something who's divorced and has 5 kids. So, but I asked him if I could come and see the equipment. It was the Genographics. That was the equipment that GE devised in the 60s to put a man on the moon. And then, of course, what happens with the equipment that are developed for governmental projects, then you have to find a civilian use for it, a citizen use. And basically, with that piece of equipment, you do everything that you can do with PowerPoint today, but that was the 80s. So, you were in an elevated room with all the power underneath the floor and climate controlled. You could do slides, but eventually when I got the job at GE with that piece of equipment, and there it was so odd because they thought, surely if you know math, you can do this piece of equipment. But I had seen a listing for the Genographics. I would get the RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology, is known for photography, and several other places. I would get catalogs from them, and usually summer workshops or things like that. Well, this particular year, they sent me the whole list of all the classes, and here's genographics classes in there, and I thought, oh, wow. So I tried to enroll in the class, and they said, well, they're all filled. I said, well, put me on the cancellation list. So one Friday, they called and said, we have a cancellation on Sunday. Can you be here? I was like, sure. So I went up, and I wanted to be the most qualified for this job. So it was a good course. It was for a week. I met people from other parts of the country. And then as we finished, and most of the people in the class, you could also take Apple. So most of the people in the class were teachers, and there were 3 of us who were interested in the genographics. So afterwards, we rode over to Syracuse, myself and a girl from Boston, because that's where that was developed. So we went up and crashed into the GE in Syracuse and got a tour of their equipment and stuff. So it was great. And it took probably 6 or 8 months to finally get the job, a whole series of interviews at GE and various other things. But it was a good job. It allowed me to do some things I like to do. And I learned a lot too. But to sell airplane engines, you don't use slides, you use view graphs. So we would have this, instead of changing a little roll in a camera, you have this big 100-foot roll of film in this big machine, and then you're visiting the photo lab and the printing lab and stuff. So it was diverse and fun. And then I had edited the yearbook in high school 2 years and did our science journal in college. It wasn't that I wanted to do it, but we were irate that they were going to discontinue it because nobody was going to be the editor. So somehow I volunteered to be the editor, and it was like, okay. So Scientific Horizons. And so anyway, I had credentials in that, and I'm interested in technical writing. So I was able to revise their technical. They didn't even consider it technical. Most of the people in that department, some of them were old linotype operators, and their attitude was garbage in, garbage out, and I'm appalled. And so I did a whole, in my spare time. Oh, and they wanted me to work at night because they wanted to show that they used the genographics equipment 24 hours a day. So I would go in at 3 in the morning and work till 10. And that worked pretty good with having the kids and whatever. So anyway, I proposed to do this manual so that when the engineers would shuffle their view graphs, it was consistent. I'd like the abbreviation to be the same all the way through the presentation. And so that took about 1.5 years, and I eventually, I was nominated and won the prize for the best 2-color technical journal in the, I don't know, whatever sort of region. And then was invited to join this Technical Writers Society, which was about the most boring thing you could ever do. After a couple of meetings, it was like, this isn't for me. But anyway, this is all nonsense, really. So by working at night, I could do things I wanted to do during the day. And I happened to, well, I've always followed photography, and had gone to Images Gallery when it was up in O'Brienville, and then now it was down on 4th Street with the galleries. And I wandered in there one day and found the woman who was in charge of that going crazy. She needed help. And I said, well, I can help you. So I volunteered to help and went there several times a week and worked with their library and their photography. And then when the Enquirer determined they could no longer do reviews of photography, I started a publication called Images, Inc., I-N-K. One of our good friends, a young man who was a photographer and a student at UC, was doing a show called the Dead Animal Show for Cage Gallery. a Cincinnati artist group effort. And the thing with a photo exhibition is once it's gone, or any exhibition, art exhibition. So if there's going to be no publicity on it, the Enquirer wasn't going to pick it up or promote photography. We decided we would do this newsletter. And so I was able to get Andrew's things in that and started doing reviews. Well, that eventually turned into a 64-page journal that was subscribed to by people in Japan, and the Bibliothèque Nationale subscribed and stuff like that. So that was cool. And Andrew eventually went on to work with A Day in Life publications on the West Coast. So he's edited quite a few of those. Comes back to town every now and again. So that's cool. So my interest was photography. My goal was to, at a certain point in time, became to have a building that would have photo studios in, live workspace for photographers. So, you know, you picture the a typical loft building or warehouse building or multi-story building with a central core of plumbing where your bathroom, kitchen, and darkroom back up to each other. And so that's what I was doing, looking for that, and eventually bought the building on Main Street that Iris Book Cafe's in. The apartments could have worked for that, but they had too nice a detail, so it was like, okay, I bought the wrong building. So, you know, I just built them out as apartments. The whole back of the building was condemned. The storefronts were boarded. And Main Street in 91 looked much like McMicken, West McMicken. And so I know it's possible. You can come from nothing and build with the right people or with people who are interested in the same goals. It's sort of like moving into a new subdivision. Everybody's interested in grass at the same time, you know. Well, this is a little different. People are interested in, you know, who's your roofer? Can you help me with this carpentry? Can you recommend a plumber? You know, can you do the plumbing? And things like that. So that was a different era, of course, on Main Street in the 90s than it is now, but it was mostly individual building owners. I call them two guys in a pickup truck, mostly doing the buildings, and it was a good time. People in the buildings were mostly artists, mostly visual artists, but I had opera singers and performers and things like that. So it's where I taught myself to do historic tax credits on that first building, and this theater will be my 43rd historic tax credit project. So, yeah.
What prompted you to buy property on Main Street?
Well, I wanted a building, and that was where a few people that I had met lived in just garrets, pretty much, you know, and they decorated them the way they wanted to with their artwork and things. And it was a pretty compatible group of people. So actually, Fred Berger was head of the OTR Chamber of Commerce at the time and recruited me to come to a meeting. I mean, there were less than 12 people in the whole organization. It was something Tarbell started, Jim Tarbell. And so I met some people there and just kind of got interested in that area. That's the area they were mostly, there were a couple people already there. And that's how I got my first loan for the building. And I think I got the first, I don't have the accurate data on that, but the first acquisition and rehab loan Fifth Third Bank did in Over the Rhine. So that was 91. I would have to go back and have somebody scramble for the details if we wanted to say that. But meanwhile, when I was in the process of buying it, I met Paul Huber up at, through the real estate people I was dealing with, which was Bob Ketterer and Karen Dominy at, was called Park Eden at that time. And then it became Eden Park Realty. So most of the business meetings were held at the, oh my gosh, what's the bar at the corner of, at the brew house? All the meetings were held there, and I met Paul Huber. He was doing the Cut in the Hill over in Kentucky, trying to acquire that property at the top in Park Hills. So when he saw what I was doing and that it was working, it was really a depressed time for real estate. We started doing things together, and then we became a couple, and I lived on Walker Street at the time in Mount Auburn, and then eventually we bought a building on Broadway that had become a 7-family. After a small 7-family, some people lived in very small spaces, but that was after I had done I was in 93 probably. So fast forward, time goes by, I get involved with, we start Merchants of Main Street, which actually was the Main Street Interest Group, renamed by Ken Cunningham when we were approached by Terry Carter from Neons to help Hudepohl Schaenling roll out their first Bach beer, their Cincinnati Bach. So we were having our meeting in the back of Caldy's, and Paul and I did the building that Caldy's is in for someone else, for Ed Hubert, who became the Urban Sites. And Terry came in and asked if we'd be interested in working on this, because he wanted to do the running of the goats on 12th Street and have this there. And we said yes, So Ken Cunningham stands up and says, we should name this Merchants of Main Street, like Merchants of Venice. And I'm thinking, okay, we got nonprofits, we got the St. Mary's Church, how's this going to work? And everybody goes, yes. So Moms or Merchants of Main Street is history. So we did the first Bach Fest and worked with mostly people from St. Francis Church, the German folks, and Heidi Lucy, who lived out east of town quite a ways. She said, people get tired of that papa stuff. She said, stick to the Renaissance. So that's when the beer was developed, and that's why we have such a wide variety of things, the monks, the Renaissance, the Germans, the whatnot. And the Germans kind of rejected us because we weren't authentic enough, so it's okay. But anyway, the point is, Paul and I went on to do a lot of different buildings, and he was very good at finance, and he was able to put together bigger projects with the city. So we did basically shell buildings, and this neighborhood had over 500 of them and still has quite a few. And we worked through the home program, and then I did historic tax credits on all of the buildings we did. And then he realized it takes a lot more money to bring back a historic building. So the home funds at that time, we started out with $10,000 a unit, then we went to $15,000, and then 20 was as high as you could get. And they told him he would have to do low-income housing tax credits to get more. So, of course, he said, well, okay, we'll do that. So they're very tedious, and they were due in like 2 months. So we put in an application. We didn't get them, but 6 months later we got them. So those are bigger groups of buildings, and with those, you're qualifying people by income, and interestingly, as we all know, artists and performers pretty much fall into that category. So we had a wide variety of people that came to the project. Some had portable Section 8 vouchers and some didn't. But actually, Shirley from Model Group taught me how to do the qualifying and what the paperwork was. And we had asked them if they'd like to manage them. They said, you can't afford us, so you need to do it yourself. So they taught us, and that was cool. So that's where I ended up with a lot of performers in both the Main Street building and the East 12th Street buildings, pretty much. When we got to the low-income tax credits, mostly those people were people who already had portable vouchers from CMHA, and not so many of the artists pursued those. It was usually a long waiting list, and I don't know if they even thought about doing it. but the first 3 buildings that we did on 12th Street I still manage, and those have some performers in, and a wide variety of people, really. Most are bartenders in their spare time, or as their real source of income, and we have retired or older people, mix of races, ages, and stuff. So it's an interesting place. So later then comes. How are we going to save all these buildings in this neighborhood? So the folks at Over the Rhine Chamber, I still belong to that, and we had Merchants of Main Street. Marge Hamelrath was president of the chamber at that time, and always had great ideas. She was involved with her kids who went to SCPA, and she was involved with the symphonies, what did they call the program for children? Lollipop concerts, the starting of those and things like that. So she was very involved and always had great ideas. And who would have thought to do Luminaria in, was that 2000 or 1999, putting the paper bags with sand and candles all the way from Main Street to Washington Park. I thought, my God, we're going to have a fire somewhere. But it worked, and it's nice to have people with bolder ideas than I have. So then came the time to do. I forgot who it was, and you probably can figure that out. One of the travel writers came to Cincinnati, probably brought by Cincinnati Preservation. And at that time, the city was concerned about redoing downtown. And they were told, if you're going to redo downtown, you have to do something with Over the Rhine. So the bigger companies got on board with the city with that and with that concept. Liz Bloom was the head of planning department. And the idea was to generate an Over the Rhine plan. And so those of us in the neighborhood who were doing buildings or doing rehabs and people who had social service agencies and people at various churches and schools were all involved in that. And the plan started, I want to say in 1999, maybe, or 2000, 1999. And they hired one person to be a director, and at a certain point they decided to buy out her contract and advertise for a new director. And I had just been invited on the board and gone to 2 meetings, and I saw the applications coming in. It was a national search, and everybody was too old, too young, too black, too white, too from here, too not from here. And I thought, you can't really direct this kind of thing that they're looking to do. So I resigned from the board and rewrote the job description and applied to be a coordinator for the plan. And we'd split the salary in half, and I'd hire an organizer, a community organizer. And she would work 20 hours a week, and I'd work as many hours as it took. And they hired me, and I worked there for several years until the plan was finished. And it was well done. It's in the space that Teak is in now at the corner of 12th and Race. And my office was in the back. Luckily, they had an administrator who did a lot of the computer work that was required. Meanwhile, GE had outsourced everything but their engineering and manufacturing department in '95, so I was devoting more of all my time to the rehab and the things we were doing. So it worked out. We had 5 major committees, 5 major topics that were in the plan, from economic development, housing, quality of life. I forget the other 2, but those were 3 of the big ones. And people came in for workshops and big tables with maps and lot of things. And then a number of people from the planning department, somebody was in charge of each committee. It really, it was tedious, strenuous, but we ended up with a result. And that's the Over the Rhine plan of 2001. And here we are.
Yeah, that's an amazing story, honestly, because I feel like that revitalization was such a big deal.
So then what? Once you're finished with the plan, there's no money for implementation. You just have a plan. And so there was a lot of talk of how to pull that off. I had worked with Damon Lynch on some things in between there in the late 90s, trying to organize some of the people from his church who lived within the neighborhood and some people not from his church. And that's where I met Linda Brock, who is the person that I hired for the community organizer. And she put the fear of God into people on the street corners to get them into the planning. So it was, everyone was there. And I don't think I or anybody else I can think of could have done that other than her. So it was good. So it took a few years before the city actually came up with a way to implement the plan. And meanwhile, occasional groups of citizens, I go to St. Francis Church, so some of those folks would come to Damon's church, and we would have occasional meetings, kind of ad hoc meetings, trying to come up with how we're going to implement the plan. And people from Main Street, Chuck and Meredith Downton, he's a retired military person and worked at P&G then after he retired. Very, very well respected. I mean, everyone came together trying to put something together, but eventually, I guess something came from, I call them the blue chip guys, the big downtown companies, and they were the ones behind having the plan drawn up anyway. They were the money behind paying myself, running the space we were in, paying the other people and things. So they wanted that plans to bring the downtown forward. So life goes on Main Street. Then comes Timothy Thomas. Then comes 9/11. So first people stop coming to the neighborhood. Second, people stop spending money. So the little businesses were having their problems. And 2008, I opened Iris Book Cafe with Mike McCavich, who was the person who started Caldy's. Paul and I actually did the build out on that space and recruited him from Tucker's. Joe Tucker called and said, I got this guy here who wants to do a bookstore. So that's, we all became friends. And so 2008, though, a lot of the things are happening on Vine Street and the rents are going up on Main, starting to go up. 2010, things are getting a little bleak and for residents. And then, so Mike and I decided we should look somewhere else that's close enough but far enough to where there could be places for the artists to live and still be close to their day jobs. Most of them didn't have cars. And so that's when we came up to the Mohawk area, which has a considerable number of vacant buildings, and the theater, like I say, Reverend Wilson had it, and we met him in 2010. He wasn't ready to sell until 2014. The roof was already leaking in 2010. 2012, it was pretty much a disaster. And then Mike passed away before we closed on the deal. There were 17 liens on the property, so it took a while. And so eventually I got possession of this theater with lots of water in it. My shock was when we went behind this curtain here. There was a huge tarp, like you put over a boxcar, full of water hanging from the ceiling. I mean, and you were slushing through water. The carpets were, everything was wet. You can see some of the plaster has been taken down. John Rice, who lives in my building, who lives in the Iris building above Iris Book Cafe, he had been a member of Base Gallery and was a creative person and eccentric but very creative, and he did pretty much single-handed in exchange for rent, took a lot of the stuff out of here that needed to go. And we would come up here every day, open the doors, rent huge fans. You know, we had a couple of cleanups. Some of the young people who became part of the, I call them the young preservationists. It was kind of a group of folks with the Cincinnati Preservation, Pam and some of them. They came and helped, and you know, we made good progress. The chair I'm sitting in is Frank Hybrant, who was on Main Street and came from New York. He had been backstage in operations for Carnegie Hall. He worked at Theater Row and then was eventually in Tampa, and then had health issues, and his sister lived in northern Kentucky, so he came up here for the doctors and moved to Main Street. The typical thing, he was told, well, where to live, and she said, well, anywhere but over the Rhine, but of course, so he found the place in over the Rhine, and there we are. So he rented a small apartment that had a studio with it, and welcomed young people there to perform and develop their skills, and started something called the Perma-Fringe projects. So sometimes on Final Friday there would be entertainment on, like a drama played out on a fire escape, a couple with a little table and wine, and an argument breaks out, and they're rushing in and out the window onto the fire escape, and some panic ensues, and or other just cool things happening, and that were staged and prepared, but gave the young people a lot of opportunity to do creative things. So he was part of the inspiration and part of our initial group for the theater, and he passed away a couple of years ago. But the red chair is his and is our symbol of Frank being here. So, and with that, you know, the first thing I did was put a roof on the building. It took me 18 months to get it through historical in Columbus, because we knew we were going to do historic tax credits, and another 18 months to get it on. And then I reached out to some wonderful people to be part of what we were doing and get the design together as to what this should be. One of the reasons for rushing into the purchase, if you want to call it rushing, in 2014, is I had joined the League of Historic American Theaters. And what I learned mostly from that was every theater, whether it's in downtown Chicago or in Nebraska, wants the building or the lot next to them because there's not enough room in the historic theaters. So one of the incentives to buy this at that time was because I was afraid Reverend Wilson might sell the lot next door, which he also owned, for a quick few bucks to get through some of the financial problems he was having. So that was part of the incentive to buy this and the lot at the same time and move ahead as quickly as we could.
I would love for you to talk about like your aspirations for the theater and how you see it functioning and what you want from
Well,
this.
my aspirations for the theater would be the same as my aspirations for the young people and not so young people who live in the buildings I take care of, and that's that there's an affordable space and a congenial space for them to get together and do things that are creative, a place for them to do things. You know, it's a shame to be in a wasteland, you know, where you don't have that ability to come together and do things, and you can't afford to do things, where your whole life is committed to surviving. And artists are great tenants. They will work hard to pay their rent, maybe not on time, but they'll eventually catch up. And they're not very demanding. They're resourceful, they're creative, and they're fun to be around. And this space, I felt, could be the beginning of this other arts district where these buildings could be built out. This is the catalytic building for this neighborhood. It's high visibility from Central Parkway. It's not just a theater tucked away in some corner of the universe. It's very important location. It's good design. The quality of the things they put in it when they upgraded it or changed its use in the late 30s, early 40s, everything is quality. The wonderful stainless steel, polished stainless steel poster cases, the terrazzo floor with the cove base around the candy counter, the in-ground hinges, the specially designed light fixtures. And as Marta likes to say, they never tore anything out, they just put things over the top. And, you know, I mean, that's what I found when I did my first building, the Iris building on Main Street. The joy when taking those boards off and finding that wrought iron, those circles, that wonderful design underneath the storefront windows. I mean, it's hard to beat. Sort of like being in a dark room and that image starts coming up in the processing. So I just felt that we could do the same thing here that happened with Main Street. We've got a group of vacant buildings. We've got diverse buildings. I got involved with the folks in the Brewery District, Paul and I did, in the late 90s, early 2000s. And most of the bigger buildings that were vacant were owned by architects. And nobody was talking about the interesting architecture of those industrial and manufacturing buildings. They would talk about the Italianate and some Queen Anne, things like that. But, and I can't say the German name, Robundelgeist or something. It has to do with the rounded arches, which are very strong and support a lot of weight. The thickness of these walls, or the thickness, if you go down to Northern Row, the Apex building, I mean, those walls are this thick. It's amazing what they did. And then the same with the tunnels and the arches. So part of it was trying to bring attention to the architecture in this area that is just sort of dismissed. We worked with the Brewery District, Steve Hampton, who was president of that for many years, an architect. They got the funds together, and the OTR Historic District stopped at Elm Street. So this area then, with Beth Sulebarter was the consultant, and put together the Mohawk Place Historic District, just the little street out here. And then, so that's a national district, and we were part of advocating for that. And then they approached the city to do the local historic district. So a national historic district, that unlocks the ability for tax credits, historic tax credits. The local district can be bigger and gives oversight to the infill project. So there's a fair number of vacant lots here, and there's a hillside, traditional Cincinnati hillside that has that clay, and things have to be built just right if you're going to build on those hillsides. So those are both in place, and that's called the Mohawk Zone District. So, you know, a lot of groundwork went into this, and then since I was involved with all those, it's a small group of people, pretty much. Well, not so small, but anyway. After doing that, and at the same time, we started to do the Mohawk area plan. So with the Over the Rhine plan, even though it was for all of Over the Rhine, it focused primarily on the area south of Liberty Street. So those were the most detailed build out, I guess, of the plan. Then, I forget what year it was, the Brewery District did the Brewery District plan, which is north of Liberty Street and includes the Mohawk area. But their focus was mostly from Liberty to Finley Street, just north of Finley Market. So that left the whole Mohawk area without much detail. So we worked with the city planning department from 2016 to 2021, and eventually that was passed by the planning commission and then the city council. It was actually ready in 2020, but with COVID and no meetings, it got stalled for a couple of years. But so things have been done systematically to lay a good foundation to make this theater have a successful comeback. It was an important part of the live, work, play, worship, and shop. It was the play. From 1912 to 1916, and I need to look this up and get the exact details, but there were about 6 theaters built within this general area. The Regal, which was called the Casino, this, I think, Bogart's, and which was called something else at the time. And this one had 900 seats. This was the largest of them, I believe, although I don't know, maybe the Regal was bigger, Casino. But it now has 601, and when we're finished with our renovation, it will have 425 to 450. It'll be comparable in size to the Jarson Kaplan Theater down at the Aronoff, which is successfully booked way into the future. So we have a market, and my colleagues will tell you about the success of that, of identifying the uses for the theater, the specific uses. So, you know, this is a place that can be different than it is, and we're here to make that happen.
Why are you so passionate about historic preservation?
I don't know, I think people who like art or architecture or good design, it's just something that was part of things years ago, where for example, going back to the Italianate buildings, the exterior design is there first and the room layout is secondary. The same with some of the other buildings. I mean, even the buildings that are run down, you can walk past them and you have this good feeling about them because the design is good. You know, it's not a hodgepodge of little boxes or whatever. It's just good design. So it's hard not to be passionate about that or interested in it. And if you see it falling away, and the quality of the construction, I mean, there's 2 things I like. I like things that look good and function how they're supposed to function. So that probably underlies most everything I do for some reason or another. I don't know why. But
I like that, yeah. Yeah, it's both practical and aesthetic.
Right.
You said this building is the Art Moderne period?
So it was
like
built...
the style?
The facade, when they redid it for the Golden Age of Hollywood. So just going back a little, when they started the silent films, which was during the early period of this theater, which was built in 1912, just like probably the vaudeville circuit, there became this circuit of films. So Paramount Film was started in early 20s, 22 to 26, I can't remember the exact year. We were part of the 10th anniversary of Paramount Films, which is pretty incredible. And their logo, which I like logos too, had a certain number of stars around it, and the star represented each one of their star performers. And so I'm not too good at names, so I can't remember the names of all those performers. But to think in, let's say, 1926, we were part of a 10-year celebration throughout the country of Paramount Films. So by then, they had come up with the stars, the network, the distribution, everything about it. Fast forward to 1938, the golden age of Hollywood is upon us. You know, the talkies came in 26. Now we've got the golden age of Hollywood. This was the primary form of entertainment of the day, as witnessed by the number of theaters built within that short period of time. It wasn't video games, it wasn't whatever. It was going to the theater for either live performances or film. So also during that time, Art Moderne, so you had Art Deco. Art Moderne is a little more transitional and maybe more 1920s style. Plastic was new. You have the backlighted acrylic or plastic panels with the words on them with the changeable letters. You had neon. You had these wonderful things that said Movie Palace. And the movie theaters were an escape place, a place to escape everyday life. So they designed this marquee. They have the flat panel on the front. They took off the little bit of fancy trim that was protruding up near the top of the theater. And the panels on the front of this are porcelain enamel over steel. They're very heavy. That was new, and that's what the White Castles were made out of. So the extra things were chopped off the front of the theater. This front was applied. The marquee was put on. And the cool thing is, this was on Hamilton Road, which came from top of Main Street by Rothenburg, came up what's now East McMicken, West McMicken, and turned here at Mohawk Place and went across the canal and went 35 miles to Hamilton. So that was in the 1800s. So when they put this new facade on in the marquee, it addresses that intersection. It's not centered on the building, and it's designed in a way that you can read it from what's now Lynn Street over there. So, you know, they were very thoughtful and deliberate in everything they did to design this new front. The poster cases I mentioned before, everything was just well done. And my own personal observation, maybe as a researcher you could find this out. Everybody who comes in to see this theater says, I drive past that every day, or I would drive past it on the way to UC, or whatever. I always wanted to come inside. And they're always amazed how big it is inside. My theory is that when they put this facade on, let's just say 1940 for round numbers, you know, and it's that blue-gray. Then across the top, cut into some of those bigger squares, are the little burgundy squares across there. My theory is that Michael Graves passed this on his way to UC, or while he was a student at UC, because it certainly seems to me to be the inspiration for a lot of his postmodern design in the late 40s and 50s. So I need somebody to prove that, and then I can have a nice story to tell about the theater.
That's a fascinating,
Can you work
that's
on that?
interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. You might be right. That's neat.
Yep,
Yeah, so the original facade was like one of those circular, the
Yeah.
arches, the Queen Anne arches.
If we had,
and it did protrude out a little bit, and they sort of shaved off that.
like
the
what
pediment,
would be
right?
a cornice on something else, you know, but
Yeah,
it was down
yeah.
a few feet from the top.
I was just looking this up because I wanted to know what year that facade changed.
What we would say 1938.
Okay.
Yeah. You know, they kind of kept up with the business of during that era of how to best use this space.
Sure.
And I think, you know, in the early days they had different political meetings, different neighborhood meetings. 1912. Jacob tells a story about the Hungarians who had come here to settle. So it was originally German, and then as other countries had, I'm not a history person, had things going on that people wanted to get out of there. They came here, and then they would settle close to other people. So some of the buildings we know a little of the history of. You know, this Hungarian family was in this building, and and she married the guy from the Hungarian family in the next building, kind of thing. So there were eras where people from different countries came and found this place to settle. And then was the Spanish flu and big epidemics, and this area was a target area because it was one of the densest areas in the country for different health-related programs. It was, I think, one of two key places for that. Again, I'm not too good on history, so, but that whole concept of how dense this place was, how the canal functioned for this place, how it's in this narrow place between the steep hillside and the canal, how the steep hillside was used for tunnels for the beer lagering, how the Germans brought their things here, their customs and their preferred beverage. And, and P&G started, the stockyards were across the canal, and from that you get leather, you get tallow, you get things to make soap, candles, which was their first business, a lot of shoe companies with the leather, pigskin, I don't know, we should have been making footballs, I guess. But, it's amazing how the geography and world conditions dictate how this area developed. So.
Yeah, influences style and
So
architecture.
if you could pursue the Michael Graves theory, I would appreciate it.
I got you.
We haven't found any ghosts, but we could find a Michael Graves theory. That would be good.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about, or any other, influences, projects, other things that brought you kind of to where you are now?
No, I just think, the holistic approach is what we're having to do. I thought we would be a lot further along with this project by now. I find I know lots of people in, quote, low places who can do lots of things, but one thing we're not good at is printing money. So we need to find some of those people who, have means, who are interested in what we're doing, and I'm sure they're there. I just don't have the direct hand to them. And we're working on this whole section of the neighborhood. We started our Mohawk Neighborhood Community Development Corp. I bought the building next door in 2015, the year after we bought this, because it was, which comes first, the people or the theater, And it had been vacant for 20 years. It had, I hate the term good bones, but it had good bones. It was a wonderful building. Plus it had arched windows, and I had never done anything with arched windows before. So kind of fell in love with those. And we have 7 apartments there now that have people that, a couple of bartenders, a couple of people who work from home. One guy works at 80 Acres Farm. One guy works for Verizon. A girl works at Mikey's Late Night Slice. So we've got, one works at 21C. So we've got a variety of people here. And this whole neighborhood could be those people who've been displaced or can't get in the game in Main Street anymore or in that area. So, and still want to be downtown, close to other creative people, places where they can do creative things. And our whole goal is to have this done in a way that's affordable. So it'll be a green building. It'll be as economical to operate as possible. And it will serve as many diverse people as we can get in here, operating 360 days a year. The adjacent space will have teaching space, so the artists can teach their skills and crafts to others. Other storefronts around here will possibly become studios or carpentry shops, scene shops, things like that, costumes. Affordable restaurants where people can grab things. Coffee house might be coming pretty soon. So we've got lots of opportunity. And, it just has to move along. We've gotten 3 grants from this city. We've just gotten our third $100,000 grant for pre-construction. So that deals mostly with water intrusion information, environmental information, mechanical and structural engineering, plumbing, sewer evaluation, and then on the vacant lot, we've had some core samples and some more things. We've looked into quite a few things like that. I mean, you can't see them, unfortunately, but we have stacks of reports. Actually, they're on the computer now. They're not stacks of paper anymore. But there are things that are required for the architects to move ahead to the next steps of, what will we do, So the stage has been extended twice. The balcony, you can't see the front of the stage. I'm a fan of contemporary dance, so I want to see their feet. So we'll be rebanking the balcony. So there's a number of things that need to be done in addition to preservation things and restoration. So there'll be new things engineered, and the fly gallery is an important aspect of this theater that not too many other theaters have, and will allow us to interchange events or sequence performances and productions in quick succession. And the footprint of the building next door, the attached building, the new build will have a practice space the same size as this stage. So it'll also serve as a black box theater, and but also that rehearsal space where things can move quickly from rehearsal to actual stage production. So the fact that this is my 43rd historic tax credit project, I know kind of what historic is looking for. They're looking to preserve as much of the old as possible in a way that relates to the observer. So they'll be very interested in the lobby. They call them, like in a residential, it would be the common spaces. So the lobby, they're very interested in. The exterior, the facade, the front facade, they're more interested in than the side or the back. And the materials, if we can preserve some of the materials or the look of the materials, that's important to them. They don't care about how much it costs. They're not concerned with that at all. And your tax credit is based on a percentage of the line items that qualify for tax credits. So if you spend more, you get more tax credits. But the thing will be incorporating what the building code might require today into the existing theater, transitioning it to function as we want it to function. Now, the fact that we're not changing the use of the theater, it was a theater, we're not turning a warehouse into a theater. So a lot of these things that are in this theater, we can probably get, I forgot the name of the article, but in the building code, but we can probably work our way through it. For example, the seating spacing might need to be different in a new build. We can probably get by with this until we put the addition on, then that may change it. If it were a separate freestanding building, it probably would have no effect on it. So trying to walk that line between what is here, and we've submitted that to historical in part 1 and part 2 of our historic tax credits, and then telling them what we're going to do with it, and then trying to do that. If it's something that we find we can't do, then we go back and make an amendment and negotiate till we get that worked out. So, for example, the fabric-covered panels that are acoustic panels, there's 3 different patterns of fabric here. They probably date from 1912, some of them. The ones that were most highly damaged by the water are newer pattern, and some are completely gone because they were so waterlogged. Now, behind there, is something that appears to be wood shavings and horsehair. It's probably not the acoustic optimum of the day. So we said we would try to restore those. We did have someone from the art museum come in and look at the fabric. She thought it was French silk, but then the piece she took a sample of was one of the newer ones, and it wasn't French silk. This we may end up proposing a newer material, a more dense material, and perhaps this pattern silk screened on it. So that's where we're getting toward. And we've had our person who did the interior theater design. So remember I said it has to look good, but it has to function. The first person I located was HMBA, Theater Design Consultants. They're based in Park Hills. They're based in New York, but Todd Burling lives in Park Hills because his wife's from Northern Kentucky. And he did the Icon Theater. He's done things in London. He's done things everywhere. And I wanted to make sure that what we're proposing actually works for the performers and for the performances and the film festivals and things that we're going to have. So it's important to me that these things fit together. So those are the kind of things that are challenging, and it's like a puzzle. I don't know if the balcony rail is high enough. Sometimes you see old theaters that will then have a little extension in a brass rail or something. I'd love to do it in plexiglass rather than what's there. I don't think I can pull that off, but I might like to try, because then you can see through it a little bit. Although when you're on stage here, it's a nice thing to look at. It brings your eyes up. So there's all kinds of things like that. Question is, will we need a sprinkler system? There's never a sprinkler system in here. There's a zillion exit doors. So with a historic treatment, we may not need to put that sprinkler in. We'll have to find that out by working with the right people on that and figuring out exactly how to approach the building department on it. While we don't have an addition on, we don't need a sprinkler system. And we may never need one in this part, but we'll need it in the new part. The vents in the ceiling and the lighting, when we there's no HVAC in here now, so we need to be able to provide fresh air circulation. And the proposal now, through the paperwork that we've been able to get through the funding that the city gave us, brings it in from the roof of the fly gallery, which is 48 feet high, and brings it down and then into the attic of the auditorium. The vents here, it's unclear whether those are to warm air rises. So is that just to leave the hot air out when you've got 900 people in here? Or what, When we did the new standing seam roof, we put vents in there, but they're not hooked up. They're not electrical, but you don't want to go back and cut holes in a metal roof if after the fact, unless you want to void your guarantee. So there's tricky things like that we need to deal with. The windows along the top were during the vaudeville days, but then when film came, you didn't want the light in. So they made these in the 1920s style plaster arches that they put in that window, and they've got a floral design on, much like the panels coming down between the fabric acoustic panels. when there was water damage, most of those were damaged. What will we do with them? There's the possibility of shades, remote shades that will come down a room darkened during the day, or when you want that, and lift at night, and when you don't want them. These will be going into the other space when the addition is built, so this side may have a different concept. If we do those shades, will we do a sort of shadow design of this floral arch? Maybe, There's lots of things like that to consider. There will be a lift that has lights here, probably by this third beam out here. That will be your lights for the stage. There will be the speakers. So there will be those technical things you want. The thing I was saving for Marta to talk about is the lifts that will be here on the stage to lift the scenery, lift the curtains and things like that. Those all have to fit within the space we have. The idea for the stage surface, you can see all the patches. It was completely waterlogged and busted through. John put these patches in, shored up stuff underneath. The idea here is to have a sprung dance floor. Having seen those little girls performing on the street, on this sidewalk and street during Second Sunday on Main, jumping around, dancing, rolling on the ground, it was like, oh my God, are these kids' legs going to be ruined by the time they're teenagers? So that's very important to me, and so we looked into the sprung dance floor. This will have that, and so will the practice space will have a comparable floor. So, designing for health, we with the HVAC system, there will be filters on the air coming in, and that wasn't when we first started. That came after COVID and belonging to that League of Historic American Theaters. They're trying to retrofit their systems, and we can design it in. So it's one thing about the longer it takes, the more technology changes. Our water-sourced heat pump that was going to serve the whole place is now replaced by an air-sourced heat pump and an auxiliary system above this fly gallery. Makes me nervous. I wonder if it's going to make noise, So, that'll go back to Todd to rule on the things that that CMTA, the mechanical engineers, have pulled together. And so that's kind of a newer version of the HVAC that they proposed in probably 2018 or 20, whenever. It seems like we've been doing this forever. So, there's just the one thing that we're doing next, and part of the city money. So the city money could go for pre-construction and stabilization. So the stabilization was that I did first, of course, before any of this, was putting the roof on and stuff, and getting these windows boarded up that were completely exposed, and getting the things out of here that were moldy and things like that. But the other thing is the security. So part of the stabilization is these doors will be replaced by new security doors. The doors as they are each half the width of that space, but they're not wide enough for ADA requirements. So in the end, which should be by the end of this summer, we should have one panel that can stay in place or be opened, and then the other panel is big enough. And then trying to emulate this panel design on it was part of the requirement. We just put that out for bids, and we're working on that now. So that will be this whole section, 1, 2, 3 double doors there, and then the back one there, 4. We're holding on this one for the moment because that will eventually be inside the next space. And, so like I say, just trying to work between the historic building, what historic likes, and what the building code requires based on the uses the people and the uses we plan on for the space is the governing philosophy.
If it looks good and functions well.
And we've been doing experiments with the seats. We know people talked about replacing the seats. And actually, when I bought the theater in 2014, and we went to some of those first, and Frank, the red chair guy, and Denny Dellinger, my friend, and my daughter, Angie, we all went to Nashville to the national conference. And at that time, we were trying to decide whether to replace the seats or to repair them. American Seating, who's been in existence since 1880-something, was there at the conference. They still had these parts. Very cool. Move ahead to COVID, they've sold to another seating company and they've discontinued almost everything. So the molded plywood, you might remember mostly from the 40s. Just like the plastic was new on the marquee, the molded plywood was of the day. And they're very comfortable. They're more comfortable than some of the redone seats we've sat in some of our other theaters. So we're trying to figure out how to do this. We have some, like I say, the seats are reduced from 900 and some to 600 currently. But all those seats were stored either above this area behind the stage, in the projection room, and some were like double seats. So we think we'll try to do a few double seats on the ends of the aisles that would be more accessible to certain people, or more desirable by almost everybody. And, figure out how to do these in place or without replacing them, because indeed they are comfortable. And we've had, the brewery district does tours through here in the dark side of the brewing heritage in October, September, October, and early November, so around Halloween. And they tour through other things. They're only here 20 minutes, but people sit in the seats. And we try to inquire, well, after the fact, well, how'd you find the seats? And they go, oh, yeah, they were nice. So why replace them? So while we've got big dollars we need to raise, there's probably certain things we can cut back on and not spend money on, and do a good bit of that with volunteers who want to help us. So, we tried to do things certain ways. And the first architects I had in, he came in from New Haven, and he's done lots of theaters around the country. But his comment was the gold trim around the stage, he bets it's green and pink underneath. I thought, I said, I'm happy with the gold. I said, well, we will refresh the gold. Because of the era for this district, this tax credit district, it goes through 1940. From 18 whatever till 1940. So we could use the 1912 version and say we're going to take all that stuff off the front, we're going to put the little cornice back on, we're going to do whatever. But to me, a marquee says theater. And I think to most people of my era, and I would think it would sing to younger people too. So why do we want to slice it off and have it look like every other brick building? No. So, I don't know where I was going with that, but the point being, I don't know what the point was. Anyway.
Is it easy for you to imagine what this place looked like back in the day when it was showing vaudeville acts? Does your imagination go there a lot?
I've gotten a few books on vaudeville. I have Iris Book Cafe, so occasionally some bizarre book comes my way, and actually, I've got one in my bag now for some people who are interested. We're looking to do down at Hannah Park. We're doing our Walk the Mohawk, Talk the Mohawk, Walk the Mohawk, Rock the Mohawk in May. And they're looking to do a skate park where the kind of heaved basketball court is, and now we're going to close off part of the street, Stark Street. Anyway, I found this book that has all these old-timey roller skating ads and stuff in. So I'm giving that to somebody this afternoon, but I've come across a couple of vaudeville books and stuff. And no, I don't understand exactly how that worked. I'd like to know how it worked. I would imagine some of the groups that came here maybe went along the river, maybe were in Marietta, maybe came down the river. I don't know. And then further along, like into the, I want to say maybe 40s, 50s, or 60s, the people who owned the Gaiety owned this and owned several other theaters. So by that time, maybe this was working differently. I don't know. Like I say, I'm not a history person. I go to I think they cringe when I come because, one thing is so cool, and then I'm off to the other thing, and I'm looking at this, and I just can't seem to get to where I need to go. So somebody else has to do that. But I would be very curious about that. We'd love to be able to tell the history of the theater. I don't see much in the way of references in the newspaper. I mean, we've done some of that research. One of the interesting things was whoever, the original owner of the theater, and then there was a manager. And within like 2 years of them opening this, he added to the balcony without telling the owners. So I don't know if he was going to get more seating in. And I believe it's the front part of the balcony because of the way it is. So that's how popular this kind of venue was for whether it was the political talks, the lectures, the vaudeville. So that's only through a couple of newspaper articles we see that the guy was sued for adding on to the balcony and stuff. And, that's interesting, but it's not real exciting. It maybe explains why something is the way it is, but, why are those seats missing? Was there a runway out there? I don't know. This is the end of, if you go under the stage, you can see where the joists changed, so you could see the couple of additions. Obviously, when there were footlights, this area was here. There's the outline of what was the orchestra pit. But it's shallow. I mean, there's nothing usable underneath here, underneath this stage. And the way it's built into the hillside, the water drains through behind the wall and down to that level, so it's not really practical for storage. The other thing that's cool is they used our marquee on Wagner out of Chicago. The sign company used our marquee for their ads, and they do the plastic letters, or did. I'm trying to locate more of the old letters, but I think because we had neon lighting, we had the little bulbs around the plastic panels with the changeable letters. We had the ceiling lighted, and the three-dimensional letters that say Imperial, the little crown, and then more neon. I mean, it had so many aspects of signage, that was very cool.
What I know about vaudeville too is that it's based on those old traveling theater troupes. So a lot of times they would have packed sets in like a portable way, and they would unpack the set and then like rotate and change out the set themselves. Like it was all supposed to be self-sufficient.
Uh-huh. Oh.
And then I guess probably when burlesque came along as part of vaudeville acts too, I don't know if there were any like special architectural features that would have been required. Like I said, I always thought of that art form as like being pretty self-contained. The troops would travel and bring their stuff with them and then unfold and
Well, there's 2 load-in doors on the back street. I mean, like I say, this is built into the hillside.
Right.
So they load out onto those wrought iron balconies, I guess, along the edge. And then there was a toilet in the back corner here under the stairs, but those walls were totally dissolved with all the rain that came in.
Yeah.
And then behind this curtain, there were 2 tiers of what we presume were dressing rooms, where the entertainers changed clothes. So there's not a lot of wings, but there's this space behind this curtain. And that's why, this curtain is kind of tied onto that setup. So if we take that down in the back, we have to take the curtains down. And the curtains you can't really draw because of the part of it's caught up here and it tears. So but there's also the original letter I on a higher, I would say like a scalloped valance that has the bullion fringe on it, like it's burgundy with that old-timey bullion fringe.
Anything else you want to talk about? Anything else you want to include?
Well, the area where the projection booth that was added on, and you can, again, trace some of that by the ornate plaster and where it is and where it isn't up there. And there's some artifacts from the film era, some very nicely designed aerodynamic-looking projector stands that are of cast iron, heavy as can be. But the fact that they went with such a nice design in a place that only the projectionist was probably going to see is pretty incredible. And then the whole story of how the projectionist would be locked in the room because of the high flammability of the celluloid and the fusible link that slams the little spaces closed that the projectionist looks out of and the projectors look out of, and then the escape hatch in the ceiling. I mean, it's pretty weird.
That's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Like you got to be willing to burn up in flames for this movie.
Yeah. It's I think there's a story there.
Yeah.